All right, we have now wrapped up our theory for the CheckIf Occluded method, and now we need to get it programmed in. Now, this is going to be taking place inside of our camera class.
Yep.
And
TP camera.
Just jump in. Just get it done, man.
All right. Well,
you got it covered.
Once again, this is Visual Studio.
I think they know
My
that
name
by now.
is... No, just kidding.
Yeah.
We're going to get some stuff in here. We're going to go up, just like pretty much every time I've coded in a new method, I go up to fields and add any fields that are needed before we do the method. We're
Sure.
going to do the same thing we've been doing all along.
And we're going to need that distance, and we're going to need the maximum allowed times that we can increment through this.
Right. And I believe the distance one we called occlusion distance step.
Right.
This is going to be the amount that we bring the camera in every time we detect the camera is occluded.
Okay.
I'm going to default this to be 0.5f. We're going to need a public integer, and this is going to be our max occlusion checks. Or max occlusion checks, yeah. And I'm going to default this to be 10. This is going to be the max number of times that we're going to iterate through CheckIf Occluded before we say, no, give up, you're coming and you're going to stand right here.
Okay.
Now, to put this method in, I'm going to scroll down right above check camera points, and we're going to code it in here. Now, one of the things that I want to bring up is the way we went through these videos. We started all the way back in the helper class, and we started showing how to calculate stuff. Then we did the camera points. We actually implemented stuff in reverse order. The flow, we start with the check, and then, or our check if occluded, we tell check if occluded to go check camera points, and that goes and tells the clip plane at near to calculate our points.
Right.
We showed it so we could step downwards through the whole process.
Well, it just takes the presentation and makes it into a more iterative process.
Right.
So
Now,
that's all there is to it.
Now, because this method is called check if occluded, this is going to return a bool. This is going to return true if we're occluded and false if not. We're going to use this as our conditional inside of our loop to determine whether or not we're going to keep trying to calculate a new desired position.
So while it's true we are occluded, we'll keep looping until we hit the maximum count.
Check if occluded. That's nice. I don't
That's
know.
close.
Yeah. All right, we need to pass in our count. This is the number of times we've checked so far. This is to prevent this check from going runaway and locking up our system or slowing it down.
That's an incrementer that we'll be setting up when we establish our loop, which will take place elsewhere.
Right. And because this method returns a bool, we need to set that up. So I'm going to create a var is occluded. So we'll initialize this to be false just to start off, and we're going to return whether or not is occluded is true or false at the end of this. We need to determine if is occluded is true or false in the meat of this method. Now, the first thing after we've got the skeleton in that we need to take care of is we need to find the nearest distance. So we're going to do var nearest distance. Now, if you remember in the last video when we were setting up check camera points, we used that method to generate our camera points and check and find out if any one of those rays were occluded. If they were, they returned a number that was the nearest point to our look at target that was hit.
Okay.
That number is going to get passed back in and held in this variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to assign what check camera points returns. Check camera points requires two positions. One is the from point that we're casting all the rays to, and the point that in space that it's going to use to calculate that near clip plane. So to send in, we're going to send in our target look at position. This is going to cause everything to be generated from where our camera is looking, and the point in space where we're going to generate those clip planes is our desired position. Now that's going to do the check, and it's going to return the nearest distance that it's found. We need to check and verify whether or not something was hit. Now, again, from that last video, we set up nearest distance to equal -1. If nothing is hit, it will return -1. If something is hit, it will return something other than -1. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a check. If nearest distance is not equal to -1, something must have been hit. So we are occluded. So if we're occluded, we need to deal with it. The way we're going to deal with it is we're going to do a check of count, which we passed into this method, and we're going to make sure that it's less than our max occlusion checks. If we're less than the max occlusion checks, we're going to try to move the camera in increments.
Right.
If we exceed our max occlusion checks, we're done.
We're in emergency mode at that point.
Yep. We've said enough's enough. You will go here, and you will go there now. And that's how we're going to deal with occlusion. So if we are less than max occlusion checks, we're going to set is occluded to be true. And we need to move our camera in increments. So we're going to take our distance, and we're going to subtract our occlusion distance step from it. This is the rate at which we're going to be decreasing our distance, trying to bring our camera in. Now, because we're using a third-person camera, and we can't switch over to a first-person camera if we get too close, we have to ensure that our distance never reaches 0. And based on the design of this system and through testing, we've determined that if you get closer than about 0.25 or a quarter of a meter from our look-at target, the camera with the smoothing becomes unreliable. It starts to wobble, jitter, does some really weird things. So we're going to ensure that at no point are we going to allow our distance to come in closer than 0.25. Now, this is hard-coded. We did this because this gave us the best results.
Right. It's something you may want to test on your end with your character at your scene scale, etc., and so on. This is a number that worked really well for us, and not really a number that we want people mucking around with too much.
Right, because if we're to expose this and somebody goes, well, I'm just going to make the near distance 0, then they can come back and go, your camera system sucks. You get in and your camera goes all over the place.
And again, it's a number we could verify. We could say, make sure that it is greater than 0. But at that point, we'd have to clamp it between something anyway. So for now, we're just going to set it to 0.25. And it's one of those things that it would just be documented that you may need to adjust.
Now, in the MMO course that we're working on, we won't have this limit. We will actually take the character, fade them out, and convert over to a first-person camera system. But that's a project that we're currently working on, and you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, we did mention it a little bit earlier. We do have an upcoming class, and depending on when you're watching these videos, the class could already exist, where we're going to be teaching the process of creating an entire MMO using Unity. And a lot of what you see here will be leveraged upon. It'll serve as a basis from which we can create a much more sophisticated version of our character and camera system. And then, of course, there's so much more, because the entire process of creating an MMO. Now, that class will only be available to 3D Buzz's member sponsor subscribers. The seating will be very limited, and again, will only be open to those member sponsors. So if you're interested in it, please jump over to 3D Buzz. There's a lot of info to be found about the MMO class. Of course, you can always PM me if you'd like. My name is Zach over on 3D Buzz, and you can send me a PM on the site or an email at zach@3dbuzz.com, and I'll help you in any way I can.
Right.
So anyway.
Yeah, we paid the bills. Let's get back to work.
I suppose so.
We had to do that. Contractual obligations.
No, it's just a good idea. It's going to be such an exciting course. I just want to make sure everybody does get to hear about it at the very least.
Yep. All right. The next part, after we've checked and dealt with our camera, if we're less than max occlusions, we need to deal with a case where we've exceeded our max occlusion checks. So if we have, we're done. We're not going to try to move the camera in increments anymore. We're going to tell the camera, you will move this far away. And that distance that we're going to use is going to be the nearest distance minus our camera.main.camera.near clip plane. So what we're doing is we're adding that little buffer to our camera. We're telling the camera, right, this was the nearest point in space that we found. You're going to hit that spot and you're going to come in just a little bit closer.
Right. It's a little bit of an extra pillow.
Yep, just to make sure that the camera doesn't end up inside of geometry at some point. Now, with all this brute forcing of the camera, we don't want distance moving to take effect. We're taking control of the camera. We don't want it to, all right, come on in this one. Yeah, don't worry, take your time, get there whenever you want. No,
right.
Not at this point. At this point, we're telling the camera it needs to do something. Get to it. Don't bother smoothing. So to do that, we're going to take our desired distance, not desired position, and we're going to set it to be equal to the distance that we've just sent. Now we've set distance up here if we're doing conditional or incremental moves, and we've set distance here if we've done the brute force jump. This will set desired distance to be distance, so when we get to that smoothing function, we're already at that position.
Yeah, we're not going to be smoothing
concerned
anymore.
Right.
We've jumped it to that location, but we won't be smoothing away from that.
Right. So once it's done all that, we've already set is occluded true, and then we're going to return out is occluded. Now notice, we only set is occluded true if we're less than max occlusion checks. We're going to assume that if we had to move this camera to its nearest possible spot, or of its free spot, it is going to be
no longer occluded.
No longer occluded, so
Right.
we're going to send out false. Otherwise, we'd get stuck in an infinite loop all over again. So, but this is just how it deals with one iteration of the process. We actually have to set up the loop now to have it continuously check.
And where are we going to do that?
To do that, we have to go up to our late update. Now, in the previous video, I put check camera points up here just so we could test the drawing code.
Sure.
We don't need that anymore, so I'm going to delete that out. And we have calculate desired position. Now, this is where we want to actually do that looping process. So what we'll want to do is set up a var, call it count, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So this is going to set up our counter to determine how many times we've gone through this loop. The type of loop that we're going to do is a do loop. I want to use a do loop because I want to ensure that we calculate desired position at least once. It has to do it once. So we'll take our calculate desired position and I'll move it inside of our do loop. So this will ensure that we're going to run that check at least once. After I've done that check, I want to increment our count. If I don't increment our count, there's no point in having it.
Right.
So we're going to do our calculate our desired position, increment our count. We need to verify whether or not our camera is occluded or not. So we're going to do check if occluded, and we need to pass in our count. Our count is what we just created here. So we're going to pass in this count. So we're going to start with 0. The very first time this comes up, our count is going to be 1. So we're going to pass in 1 here. As long as 1 is less than our max occlusion checks, we will step the camera if it's occluded. Once our count goes above that, we will force it. But either way,
that will return as no longer occluded.
Right. This is going to return true if we're occluded, false if it's not. But if it returns true, it's going to say, hey, we're occluded. Go recalculate desired position. If you remember, inside of check if occluded, we're changing our distance. So part of that whole check desired distance or desired position is determining the new distance. So
Right.
every time we move that, our camera's desired position is going to change. So we run through the process over and over again up to our count, and we move it in a little bit. The moment we've exceeded that count, if our camera's still not free, we bring it all the way in, and then we return out false out of our check, which means we fall out of this loop. Once we fall out of this loop, we've essentially told the system we've done everything we possibly can to free up the camera. At this point, this is the best I can do. Update the camera's position. So if we're still not free, We just have to deal with the problems.
Right.
And that problem being the fact that we will probably be penetrating the player.
Right. At least for just a moment. I mean, if you're doing this like while on the move and you manage to somehow get into a situation that this system couldn't get out of, chances are it's only going to be for a frame or two.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a really quick thing. This is a good solution, but it's not 120% foolproof.
Right.
There are ways that you can fool it.
Right. And with this loop in place, we should be able to go and test and see if we have some occlusion for the first time. So let's jump back over to Unity. Let's go ahead and hit play. If I got the loop right, this should work. If I messed it up, we'll probably blow up Unity. So
good luck then.
Yep. All right. So here we are. We've got a camera. I can still move it. That's a plus.
Mm-hmm.
You can see we've got our triangles or our pyramid thing being drawn with our bumper.
Yep.
Now if I hit the ground, we're moving.
Yep. Seems to be working.
Yep. We didn't penetrate the ground.
Now, we're not going back to our original position, but
Nope.
that's something we're going to handle in an upcoming video.
Right, but you can see how annoying that would be. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
going,
Oh, yeah.
"Oh, I'm running around. Hey, whoa, look at this. Uh-oh, see what happened?
We hit the player?
We hit the player. You know why we hit the
Is it
player?
those eyes?
No, it's not his
No.
eyes. I didn't finish checking our player. This is why we did the checks to figure out whether or not we did a player.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't told our player yet. Here's our character capsule.
Yeah.
We told it to look for a tag of player.
Right. But we never set that tag.
We never tagged it. So we need to set our capsule to be of type player. We're also going to set it to be ignore raycast because our character shouldn't intercept any rays.
Okay.
So we're going to ignore raycast. Now,
And you went ahead and set that for the children as well, yeah?
well, ignore raycast automatically cascades down.
Okay.
Unfortunately, our tags don't. We have to do those one by one. At some point, I'll probably get tired of doing this, and I'll probably write a little plug-in to do it for me. Probably turn it into a video set.
Sure, why not?
But what I'm doing is I'm just taking all of its geometry and I'm setting them to be tagged as player just to prevent any possibility
Of what you just saw.
Exactly. But I wanted you to see what was going to happen. So now if I save this, go ahead and hit play.
Still looking good.
Now I can run around.
Yeah.
No more collisions with ourselves. Now I can back our camera out and kind of like the example that you did with the whiteboard. If I run up, here's a roof, our little roof of our Parthenon. So if I run under it, our camera snaps underneath, just like what we want. We keep running, we keep running. Oh, we're clear. Hold on a sec. Oh, move the mouse all the way back out.
Exactly.
So,
We don't have any means to put the camera back at the distance it originally held before we had to solve our occlusion problem.
right, but that's what we're going to do in the next video. I also want to check our little condition with our wall. So if we
So
come
deal
over
with
here,
shearing.
yep. So we're not getting a whole lot of shearing.
We're not getting
Actually,
any shearing.
Any shearing. That's
Yeah.
even better. Let's go ahead and zoom up on our main camera.
And I mean, I tried to draw out the circumstance of shearing in our overview video, but basically what it would result in is some part of that wall clipping through the edge of the camera so you could see through it.
Right, and I'm going to see if I can replicate a little bit what we're talking about. So if we get close to the wall, this is our top-down view over here. What you're watching is this little box right here. So as I get closer to that wall, the moment it hits, it starts moving the camera forward.
Right. So we get the effect of sliding along the wall.
And you can see the step at which it was moving. That step is the occlusion distance step. I can take this and say just move 0.1 instead of 0.5. So if I come up, hit the wall, you can see we get a much smoother transition.
Right.
So,
But if it takes more than 10 steps to try to break free of our problem, then we're just going to jump, which means we might break that smoothness.
and you can see where we get too close, we're actually penetrating the head. You know, and we're really, really close, but that was what we're talking about with the condition. It's better to penetrate the character, which is fixable,
Right.
than it is to penetrate this wall and see out into space.
Right. Because we could set up some system by which we fade out the camera, or as you mentioned, we're going to be handling in the MMO class, we can switch over to a first-person camera or something of that sort.
And in the MMO stuff, we do both.
Right.
We actually fade out the camera and allow you to take first person
Or
control.
fade out the character, and then, switch over to first-person. All right, so is there anything else we're going to add? I mean, this seems to be working great.
Well, in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to handle the problem with, once we are free of being occluded, getting our camera to automatically pan back out to where it was before.
Okay, so that'll wrap things up for this video. Thanks for watching.